Welcome back to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. We are your host, Jack Stern and Spencer Michaelis. Spencer is back this week. He had his commitment to the pod wane last week. He was out of town, but he's back now. So I instructed everyone to flood him with all of their questions for this week, which you did. We got a lot of questions that we'll
Yes,
dive
we did.
into. Yes, but first we kind of have a tale of two series to talk about for the Brewers this week. But before we dive into that, Spencer, how was your week off, and how are you feeling in your week back?
It was good. I was in Door County spending time with extended family, so it was fun. I got to see all my little cousins that I don't get to see from kind of all around the country and stuff. So it was a good weekend off. I appreciated everyone questioning my commitment to the pod, including Kurt, who shout out to Kurt for filling in. I appreciate that. I didn't appreciate the comments, but it's fine. We'll get past it. I'm back now. I'm very committed, and I will be here. I'm not going to commit to anything. I was going to say I'll be here every time, but I can't guarantee that. So I'll be here as often as I possibly can.
So within a span of 10 seconds, we had "I'm very committed" followed by "I won't commit to anything."
Correct.
A little
Yes.
bit of a paradoxical statement there.
I'm like a
But
high school football recruit. That commitment doesn't mean anything until I sign something. So
yeah, so as Spencer mentioned, we had Kurt fill in for him last week. He did a very nice job as the temporary co-host. If you want, you can go back and listen to that episode from last week. If you haven't yet, it's a good one. We talked about all kinds of stuff. But now Spencer and I are going to talk of all kinds of stuff about all kinds of stuff. Sorry. We'll start with the Brewers wrapping up their homestand, the longest homestand of the year for Milwaukee, and they finished it off in grand style. They won, as we talked about last week, those last two games of the Dodgers series, and then they continued it with a 3-game sweep of the AL Central leading Cleveland Guardians, who entered that weekend with the best winning percentage in all of Major League Baseball. It was a tight series, but the Brewers coming out on top in all three of these games. So we'll jump into the action right now. Milwaukee taking game one by a final score of 5-3. The Brewers doing a lot of damage early. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead in the first inning. Jackson Chourio hitting a triple and Willie Adames hitting a 3-run home run in that inning. Garrett Mitchell adding some more run support with an RBI double in the third, and then Bryce Terang hitting an RBI single in the fourth. That would be all for Milwaukee's run scoring output in this one. They put up the 5 runs. Aaron Civale then doing a nice job with that lead that the Brewers staked him to. He went 6 shutout in this one, giving up just 4 hits, striking out 4 guys, issuing just 1 walk. A note on Aaron Civale, these last 2 starts now, as if he did not have enough breaking balls, he's also added a shorter slider into the mix on top of the sweeping slider and the curveball that had already been his bread and butter this season. So now he's got 3 distinct breaking balls that he's throwing, and he's largely been throwing all 3 of those at about the same rate in these last 2 starts. We saw that shorter slider again in this outing against the Guardians, especially once the lineup started to turn over multiple times. That's when he started to go to it a little bit more. I talked to him a little bit about it a couple days after that start, and he just said it was something that kind of the Brewers pitching development team had brought to him after he came to Milwaukee. He's thrown a shorter slider in the past, but he had scrapped it starting this year with Tampa Bay, just throwing the sweeper. They kind of approached him a few weeks ago and just talked about maybe working this back into the arsenal. He said they talked about some stuff like that when they were in Atlanta, and now we've seen it in a game these last couple times out. But Spencer, I kind of think that what we've seen now from Aaron Civale these last couple turns through is kind of more what I was hoping we could see from him. This is a guy who does not have the highest ceiling, but I do still think he is a tier above some of the other guys with lackluster looking stuff who the Brewers have had to turn to for innings at times this season. He's not in the same camp of like a Bryce Wilson or a Joe Ross or someone like that, at least in my book. He's got a far more accomplished, far more filled track record, so to speak, as a reliable middle to back of the rotation starter. And he's also got way better breaking stuff than some of these other guys who have gotten starts for the Brewers this year. And now we've kind of seen it, his ability to manipulate the baseball to move in so many different ways, finding a mix that works for him, adding another breaking ball into that mix with that slider. and their results have been pretty solid these last couple times out. So I think now we're kind of starting to see a little bit more of what you're hoping to see from Aaron Civale. It's not going to be a shutout outing every time out, but quality number 4, maybe even number 3 material, I think is what he's capable of. So it's been good to see that his last couple times out.
Yeah, 100%. And I did notice that you didn't mention Dallas Keuchel, so I take that as you saying Dallas Keuchel is better than Aaron Civale, but it's fine.
No, Aaron Civale is also better than Dallas Keuchel. I'll throw that in there as well. Honestly, that whole storyline kind of feels like a blip on the radar right now
Yeah,
of this season, because it kind of was in a way. Keuchel only made, what, 4 starts for the Brewers?
yeah, 4 or
It wasn't
5.
many, so
Yeah, but no, I do think we are seeing the kind of pitching, and like you said, he's not going to shut everyone out, but the type of guy that we thought we were getting when the trade happened, or could be getting at least. We both liked it at the time. When we revisited at the deadline, when we had our deadline show, we talked about it in a good light still. He wasn't really performing at that time. It's been a lot better the last few times out, really. But I do think that shorter slider might be helping in terms of being a pitch that he can throw for strikes more often. I don't know if the numbers back that up, but I know that's often why you would make that change. And part of his concern, and part of the reason some people would push back on us saying he needed to throw more breaking balls, is that he wasn't really all that competitive with the sweeper or the curveball at times. Like, they were missing pretty badly once in a while, or he was leaving them up. The shorter slider can be a little bit easier a lot of times to control because it doesn't have as much movement. You don't have to worry about accounting for as much movement with your release point and stuff. So I think it's a good addition for that reason, in terms of being something that he can throw and probably have a little bit more of a feel for or command for consistently. And then the other pitches can play up a little bit off of that too, because now they're seeing that spin, the breaking ball spin 3 different times. And that is hard for a hitter. Like, you're seeing a breaking ball, you read a breaking ball, but there's 3 different ways it can move, and amount of movement and speed and all that stuff. So I think it's a good addition. I'm glad he was open to it. Not all pitchers are, especially late in the season. And, he's gone through a lot of different changes over the last couple of years, but I'm glad he was open to it. And it seems to be paying some pretty good dividends early.
the one negative that we're going to quickly just look at from this game, obviously lots of be happy about the Brewers winning 5-3, good pitching performance, early offense. Willie Adames, though, the defense just continues to be a very big problem. And that's actually going to be a theme throughout this episode again. We're now going on like a couple months of the defense just being really, really bad. Like, terrible defense from him.
Yeah.
Both in terms of not necessarily showing off the same kind of range that we've seen before, or just not taking the best routes to balls, but also just not making routine plays. And this was what happened in this one. In the 4th inning, he had a runner on first base. Civale induces a ground ball to short. Whether they were able to turn the double play or not, yeah, I think it would have been a little iffy, but still, this is a routine ground ball to short, easy one to, scoop it up, flip it over to second. You try to make the turn, whether you get him at first or not, I'm not sure. But this ball's hit right at Adames, makes a fielding error, so he doesn't pick it up cleanly, and then proceeds to throw it down the right field line, right past Bryce Terang. And like, this throw wasn't even close. There was nothing that Bryce could have done to knock this ball down. And instead of, potentially a double play, or at the very least getting that lead guy, now all of a sudden you've got runners on second and third as a result of that play. Fortunately, Civale able to pitch around that. But again, just another really rough play for Willie Adames. And we're going to see more of these even within this episode as we're kind of looking at this 6-game stretch here. But it's a concern. It still is a concern. It's not the first time we've talked about it, but it's also troubling that the indicators are that it's getting worse, not better. And
Yeah.
that's what's really alarming right now.
Yeah. You could see like a moment of panic when he bobbled the ball. And when that starts happening, that's when it becomes a really big problem, because that's when you compound issues. Like, when you start panicking after one little mistake, usually it's going to happen again, or you're going to make that one little mistake a bigger mistake. And that's definitely what he did. This one was the one that he, if I'm remembering, this was the one he like slapped his glove with, right? And it went past Terang. Wasn't that one, or was that the Lux one? I might be
That was
confusing
that
the
was a
two.
that was that was a Lux one, I think. Don't quote me on that. We're talking
Okay.
about a lot of
I know
misplays here, though.
there's
That's kind of the point that it goes back to. Like,
right.
there's been enough of them now where it's hard to remember exactly which play
Yeah.
was which because we have seen this multiple times, but
But yeah,
it's yeah.
it's a problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah, not what you wanna see, and again, like we said, that's kinda what it's looking like to me right now. Once it starts to look like a mental funk too, on top of just a physical one, that's when you're really running the risk of running into some serious problems, and unfortunately, it looks like that's where it's trending right now, so really important that he and the Brewers find a way to snap him out of that and turn it around. One thing that is worth noting, he is, and this doesn't excuse this play, but he is trying to break in a new glove at short right now because the one that he had previously used most of the time just basically started falling apart, wasn't usable in a game anymore. I'm not going to use that as an excuse because, again, some of these plays are just so routine that whether you're using a new glove or not, you
Right.
should be able to make these. But, or maybe a better way to put it is that's the company line. Maybe that's what people will, and I'm not saying anyone's done it yet, but just the fact that it's been thrown out there,
Yeah.
like, it does feel like a little bit of the PR damage control line. Well, he's actually still really good, but he's just breaking in a new glove. It I can see that being a factor once in a while, but just the number of misplays we've seen so far, and again, we'll talk about it as we keep going. There's other ones that aren't necessarily related to the glove. Like when he makes a throwing error like this on top of it, that has nothing to do with the glove. When he makes a play that we'll talk about later in the St. Louis series that was a hit, but he should have gotten to. That's not related to the glove. So it's not good because it seems like now it's just everything is all compounding on top of one another, and it's just creating this really ugly mess right now for him. But hopefully he can turn it around both for his sake and for the Brewers' sake, because again, it doesn't just hurt the Brewers, but it also is not great for his pending free agency case if he can't demonstrate to potential suitors that he's still a capable defensive shortstop. So we're not going to talk about that a whole lot, though, at least right now, because again, we will kind of get back to it a little bit later. We'll move on to game two for a little bit here. The Brewers rattling off a couple of low scoring wins for the rest of this series. This one in game two was a 2-1 final. Gary Sanchez opening the scoring in the first inning with an RBI double to make it 1-0. Josh Naylor tying it off of Freddie Peralta with a home run in the fourth, but that was all that the Guardians would put up in this game. Freddie Peralta with one of his most efficient starts of the year, going 6 innings, just allowing 4 hits. That solo home run was the only run he allowed. A couple of walks, only 3 strikeouts, which was a little bit interesting. But it kind of worked in his favor because it meant that he was able to get through those 6 innings on just 81 pitches. Sounds like there was never really a whole lot of thought for sending him back out. Pitch count wise, you would think that he could have gone out for the seventh, but he hasn't had an extra day off the last couple turns through the rotation. The Brewers have tried to get him that extra day whenever they've been able to. He hasn't had it the last couple times through. He also had a pretty stressful rematch with Naylor to end that 6th inning. The tying run was on third base. It was a long at bat, and he was finally able to put him away with a big strikeout. That is a very draining at bat for a pitcher. And I think this is something that isn't always talked about enough when we talk about pitch counts. Not every pitch has the same level of physical and mental strain. Pitches don't exist in a vacuum. Each one exists within the context of that at bat and the game situation, the pitches that came before it, the count, what all these different things that are going on. And when you have an at bat like that, where it's like a 6 to 8 pitch at bats, I can't remember exactly what it was in that at bat to Naylor, but it was in that range. And when you have an at bat like that in a stressful situation and it takes a few pitches to put a guy away and you're airing it all out there, you're going as deep into the well as you can to put that guy away right there. That is going to be a little bit more taxing than if you're cruising at 81 pitches and you're not dealing with any base runners. So I didn't have any problem with pulling him after this, but good stuff from Freddie Peralta in this one. These are kind of the outings that you'd like to see from him a little bit more. But the Brewers able to retake the lead after that game-tying home run. William Contreras coming up in the bottom of the fourth with a solo home run of his own. He's been on a really nice power binge in this month of August, so that's really cool to see from him. We've always talked about what can happen if William Contreras starts to elevate the ball a little bit more because he has some of the best raw power in the game. He's consistently posted one of the highest hard hit rates in the game, the highest exit velocities in the game. He's got one of the highest bat speeds in the game. So what we're seeing right now is he's elevating the ball a lot more, and it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to see those power numbers start to follow, don't you think?
Yeah, I enjoy home runs a lot. And I especially enjoy them from William because, like you said, first of all, when he hits them, they usually are just destroyed because he does tend to hit the ball very hard. And yeah, they're rarely cheap for William. A lot of them are left center, right center, 400 plus feet. Like there's not many wall scrapers for him. So just visually, they're fun. But also, the Brewers lineup needs somebody in the middle of it hitting for some power, and especially with Yelich out for the season, like they need some of these guys. Willie's been doing it for a while. Willie's been really good for a couple of months now. And Williams really turned it back around the last couple of months too, but August has been really, really, I think it's like a 1200 OPS or a little bit higher right now in August. So
Yeah.
he's mashing right now. And obviously he's not going to have a 1200 OPS the rest of the season, but him being a legitimately good hitter, and especially in the power department, helps this lineup a lot.
Absolutely. So when you have a series like this one where you're obviously keeping the Guardians off the board, you got to give a little bit of a shout out to the bullpen for the work they did, and they were great in game two. Jared Koenig is someone I especially want to highlight in this one, striking out all three batters he faced in a scoreless eighth inning. The velocity was really good for him again, getting swing and miss. And he also broke out a couple of four-seam fastballs in that game too, which we had not seen from him at any point this year. They actually have fairly decent carry. He was sitting at he only threw two of them, but they were like 17 to 18 inches of vert coming from a little bit of a lower slot from a big guy. Like it's a pretty good pitch too. So that's another interesting wrinkle for him if he can kind of mix that in a little bit more. I think he threw at least one more in one of his outings in St. Louis too, because it was the same deal where it was like 97 and StatCast marked it as a cutter because the shape was different from the two-seamer that he throws, but really good stuff from him. Devin Williams coming up with another save. He's been very busy for the Brewers lately, and he was able to lock this one down as well. Game three, Milwaukee shutting out the Guardians in this one, improving on their pitching performance from the previous evening. The Brewers winning this one 2-0. Willie Adames getting it started with an RBI single in the first, and then Eric Haas adding that second run with a ground out in the second on the contact play, which worked quite a few times for the Brewers during this homestand. So if you ever find yourself saying the contact play never works, or if you ever find yourself talking to someone who says the contact play never works, you could show them this homestand. It was a banner week for the contact play. The real highlight of this game, though, was the Colin Ray bounce back start after having a rough showing against the Dodgers in his previous outing. Ray carried a no-hitter into the sixth inning until he finally gave up a base hit with 2 outs in that inning. He would go 7 shutout in this one, pitching into the eighth, allowing just 2 hits, striking out 5. Really, really good stuff from Colin Ray. He was just in command the entire day. A lot of soft contact in this one, and still 5 Ks as well. We've seen more swing and miss from him and more strikeouts over these last 7 weeks or so now. And in my own interests, I will once again promote the piece that I wrote on him before that unfortunate Dodgers outing, because it once again starts to look a little bit better now after he had a good start. But no, Colin Ray deserves a lot of credit for all the work that he's put in to get himself to this point, just continuing to be a very reliable arm for the Brewers. Once again, looking at the job that the bullpen did in this one, it was Brian Hudson and Jared Koenig, the two lefties, taking this one the rest of the way. Brian Hudson with one of his better outings that we've seen since he came off the injured list. He also had a really good 2-inning outing against the Dodgers a couple days prior. But in this one, he and Eric Haas really leaning on that sweeper a lot to get some chases out of the Guardians. So he was strong. And then Jared Koenig coming up with his first MLB save. Devin Williams had pitched in 3 of 4 going into this one. So Koenig got the call, worked a perfect ninth close things down there. Two big lefties in the back end of that Brewers bullpen who have really made a name for themselves this year, and they were the two who got to take this one home the rest of the way. After that, the Brewers enjoying an off day on Monday before traveling to St. Louis to take on the division rival Cardinals. This series did not go nearly as well as the homestand did. The Brewers taking game one, but then dropping the next two in fairly frustrating fashion. We'll start with game one here, though. The Brewers extended their winning streak to 6, a season high 6-game winning streak, mind you, with a 3-2 win over the Redbirds. Milwaukee scoring 1 run in each of the 2nd, 5th, and 8th innings. That was enough run support for Frankie Montas, who delivered his best start as a Brewer yet. 7 shutout for him, just 1 hit allowed, just 1 walk, and only 3 strikeouts, so a lot of balls in play. I did not have the luxury of watching this one in person. Spencer, was there anything that you saw from Frankie Montas in this start that stood out to you?
I mean, a big part of it was just not walking people. he's had some walk issues. There was some good luck, but honestly, the hard contact mostly came in like those last 2 innings. His pitch count was good enough to potentially send him out for the 8th, but they made the right decision not doing that, in my opinion. I think they were starting to square him up a little bit, but no, honestly, he was hitting spots well. He's throwing a lot of fastballs, and it seems to be working really well for him. I'm not entirely sure I understand how, but I mean, they're not bad pitches or anything, but it just feels like they shouldn't be working as well as they have been. He's getting the 4-seam up pretty well with the Brewers. It seems like he's not missing that spot very often when they do call for it up. So that's got to be helping. But yeah, I don't know, but right now he's been extremely helpful since he came over, and way more than I would have expected. And we talked about it. I thought he was probably, if you got any outings like this, I would have been shocked heading into it. But right now he looks like a guy who can help the rest of the season. Like I kind of have a little belief in Frankie Montas now.
Yeah, I did not have 7 shutout on my bingo card at any point for him really after that acquisition, but you mentioned the fastball heavy mix, and this was something that I tweeted about the day after that start. When he was with the Reds, about 65% of his pitches were the 4-seamer, the sinker, or the cutter. Since he's joined the Brewers, that's pushing almost 90% at this point. He's in like the mid 80s now for percentage of pitches that are some variety of the fastball. You could maybe, if you want to, make the case that the cutter is a little bit closer to a breaking ball than a fastball variation, because it does have quite a bit of velo separation from the mid to upper 90s 4-seamer and sinker. So if you want to frame it that way, it does kind of change the way you look at it a little bit. But still, like, this is not quite the way that I was expecting it to go. But I mean, the Brewers love their guys with 3 fastballs, and right now they're definitely leaning into that 3 fastball mix for Frankie Montas. One thing that does stand out to me a little bit with the way that he's used his pitches the last couple times. So he's, what is he, 4 starts in, and the last 2 have been, or is it 5?
I think it's 5.
4. It's 4 or 5, and the last 2 have been the Cardinals and the Dodgers. These last 2 are really the ones where he did not use the splitter or the slider at all. Not using the splitter is the one that really stuns me, because that's arguably his best pitch, at least at the time of the trade. You could make a case it was. It's always been kind of his bread and butter throughout his career, and he's hardly thrown it these last 2 times out. He has, however, in these last 2 starts, especially the Dodgers one, and he mentioned this when I asked him about it in post game after the Dodgers start. The Dodgers just don't chase. They have one of the lowest chase rates in baseball. It's the Dodgers and the Brewers basically that are, I don't know if they're the top 2. They're in the top 3 for sure, though, because I was looking at this on Savant. They're in the top 3 for sure for lowest chase rates as an offense. And a splitter is primarily an out of the strike zone chase pitch. You're not trying to land splitters in the strike zone. That's just not how that pitch works based on the way it moves and the way it comes out of the hand. Like, the whole idea is that the late movement from the lack of spin is going to lead to that pitch kind of dropping off the table out of the zone, and you're going to get a chase. If you're leaving it in the zone, it's probably not doing what it's supposed to do anyway, and it's got a better chance of getting hit. So with that in mind, he hardly threw any to the Dodgers. The Cardinals have basically an average chase rate, but I think you can still kind of make the connection there as to why you wouldn't throw it against a team that doesn't chase more than average. But yeah, he's really leaning on that 3 fastball mix right now. Is it going to keep working this well? I'm still a little skeptical, but this is just kind of what the Brewers do now. They bring in guys who throw all 3 kinds of fastballs, and they mix them, and it seems to keep guys off each fastball just well enough to the point where you can have some success. And that seems to be what's going on with Frankie Montas right now. Someone who is not having as much success since his acquisition at the trade deadline is Nick Mears, who has just somehow followed the unfortunate trend of every reliever the Brewers bring in at the deadline becomes a dinger machine, whether it was a problem for them or not. We had Matt Bush is one example. He was always
Mhm.
prone to home runs even before the trade, but it got way worse after he came to Milwaukee. Rogers is the one who stands out to me the most because
Made no sense.
he never had home run problems at any point in his career, and as soon as he came to Milwaukee, his home run rate more than tripled. He was allowing like 3 per 9 with the Brewers. Everything else got better except the home run rate, which just crashed out of nowhere. And now Nick Mears, who gave up, I should have written it down. It was either only 1 or 2 home runs with the Rockies all season. He's given up 4 now with the Brewers. And I'm not sure how you can script this, but that's what happened in this game as well. He gave up a 2-run homer to Matt Carpenter, so Koenig had to come in to record the final out of the 8th. We'll talk a little bit more about Nick Mears because he was kind of right in the middle of some unfortunate events later in this series on the tail end. Devin Williams picking up another save in the 9th inning, but this one was pretty stressful. He only threw 17 pitches, but it was almost all high stress pitches. He allowed a 1-out single and a double to put the winning run in scoring position, and you have runners on second and third then with 1 out. Lars Nootbaar is intentionally walked to load the bases, set up a potential double play. Devin Williams then strikes out Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Gorman with the bases loaded to end this one, but an eventful save for him got the job done. I keep pointing out eventful save and high stress pitches because it does become pretty relevant by the next night already. The Brewers losing this one in extra innings 10-6. The Brewers had multiple leads in this one, blew multiple leads before finally falling in extras. Tobias Myers getting the start in this one, and another outing for him where the stuff in the execution were not great,
Mhm.
but he somehow was able to put up a decent line, even if he didn't work super deep. Worked in and out of a lot of trouble through 4 innings. So he only gave up 2 runs, but he allowed 6 hits, walked 2 guys, did strike out 5, had a couple of big Ks in this one as well to help him get out of those jams. But kind of another one of those days where he wasn't great, but he got through it. And I think that's really about all I have to say about it. Probably a little bit of good luck in there, a little bit of also making some pitches when he needed to. But he found a way to gut it out. That's kind of what most of these outings have been for him over this last month. He had the one really good one where he worked into the 8th. But outside of that, it's kind of been a lot of this grinder type outings where he's just finding a way to get through it. And that's what he was able to do in this one again. The Brewers scoring in 3 straight innings to support Myers and give themselves a 4-2 lead. That stretch was capped by a Jackson Chourio 2-run single in the 7th. That's what gave the Brewers that lead. Chourio would go 4 for 5 in this game, his first 4-hit game in the big leagues of his career. He continues to be red hot for Milwaukee. Unfortunately, that lead would not last very long because Brian Hudson entered in the 7th inning, gave up a double and then a 2-run home run. So that lead evaporating pretty quickly and eliciting some strong feelings from Spencer.
Uh,
Not Brian Hudson eliciting strong feelings from Spencer, but William Contreras. So I'll kind of let you take the lead on this one because you were the one who was calling attention to it on the internet, as one does, as it was happening. But Brian Hudson did not throw a single sweeper in this outing, and this is coming after the outing against Cleveland where he threw a bunch of them and was able to get through a scoreless inning there. So I'll just kind of let you take it from there. What did you see in this inning that you maybe were not quite on the same page as William Contreras over?
Well, first of all, Brian Hudson's sweeper usage has gone down over the course of the season, just generally, which is confusing to me because in terms of performance, it is his best pitch, which obviously you can't throw majority sweepers. It's a hard pitch to command. Like there's reasons to use his fastballs, but his fastballs played better as well when you were using the sweeper more. So I'm just in general, I'm confused why the usage has been going down. I will say I thought perhaps it was related to the oblique because he seemed to be being bothered by something for a little while. And it was all at that time that the sweeper usage started going down. I thought maybe it was injury related. I don't think it is anymore, especially because Contreras has now called 40 pitches in his last 2 times catching Hudson. He has called 1 sweeper in that time. And we talked about Haas. He called, I believe it was 7 of 16 or 6 of 17 were, 7 of 16 pitches were sweepers when Haas went back there. So it's not a matter of something that Hudson can't do. It's clearly at least somewhat related to just pitch calling in general, which that bothers me to begin with on any level. But in this game in particular, and you brought up numbers here, so I'm going to reference those a little bit, but the Cardinals hitters who were up, they mostly hit lefties well. Like Burleson's a lefty. He doesn't hit lefties super well. He's not terrible for a lefty hitter against a lefty pitcher, though. Contreras, Luke and Baker, who ended up hitting the 2-run homer, they've hit lefties well in their career. They've hit lefties a lot worse on breaking balls. So if the thought was, and you looked this up because you're right, there's a lot more to pitch calling than just specifically what I think works best for that pitcher. Like you have to factor in what hitters do. Even if you are doing that, most of these guys are much worse against the lefty breaking ball than against the lefty fastball. Unless Hudson went out there, both times William was catching him and said, I have no feel for my sweeper. We're not using it, which feels unlikely to me. I just don't understand why it's not being used. And this isn't only a Hudson thing. This is a William Contreras not calling breaking balls. I'm calling it an issue because I think it's an issue. I think it's a legitimate issue for the Brewers. And over the course of the season, I looked this up, and this was something I thought might be the case. When runners are on base, he does not call breaking balls, like hardly at all. A runner gets on base, he's down to 22% of pitches are breaking balls. That is the lowest in baseball by a decent amount. With runners not on base, when the bases are empty, it's 29%. I would say still too low for the most part, but it's more middle of the pack. I'd say it's probably bottom third in baseball, but it's not anywhere near last. I think part of what's happening with William is that Hudson has been giving up some base runners more often than usual, or more often than early in the season. I think William's still too concerned about the running game. And we talked about this super early on this season. To me, not calling off-speed pitches because when runners are on base points to somebody who's worried about, one, allowing a steal, which obviously you don't want people stealing bases willy-nilly against you, but you still have to focus on getting batters out. And two, I think it's a concern about wild pitches or pass balls as well. Like, I think that's factoring into the equation too. And that's mainly based on my experience with catchers who often, as a coach or a player, worried about those things and wanted to call fastballs because they were worried about the running game. They were worried about a wild pitch with a guy on third or whatever. If that is the case, and to me, a lot of the stuff points to that being the case, he's got to get over that because you have to get hitters out more than anything else. Like, that has got to be the priority. And Hudson's sweeper is a very good pitch, and it needs to be used regardless. I think, to me, the biggest thing here is that I almost wonder if he's worried too much about what hitters are thinking sometimes, instead of just using his pitchers and saying, this is his best thing, like best pitch. This is his best plan of attack. Let's go at him with our best and see what happens. And just going fastball, especially we should point out Brand Hudson's velo has been down for a while from where it was early in the season. Like, it's not even the same fastball he was throwing early on, where he was like 93-ish a lot of the time. He's been more like 90, 91. Even before the injury and since the injury, it's been basically there. The cutter's not that good of a pitch on its own, but we like to throw the cutter a lot more now. I don't know, man. I feel like I just rambled and didn't give you a real good answer there because I have a lot of things going through my head. But that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I'm trying not to be too overly harsh about it still, because I don't know what goes on in pitching meetings. I don't know what the plan of attack is for the hitters via the team. Like, there is one. We don't know it. We don't have access to that. I'm not privy to that information, but everything I see points to him needing to call the sweeper more for Hudson, and generally more breaking balls, I think. But especially with Hudson, it needs to happen. The usage can't be cut in half from where it was early in the season when he was the best reliever in the NL for a stretch. Like, go back to what was working really well for him. Let's make sure that's what's like, that could fix things again. He could get back on track, I think, if you go back to what worked for him. I just don't get why we ever really went away from it. So again, not sure I gave a real good answer there, but I gave a lot of information and thoughts. So Jack, what are you thinking?
Couple things for me. I did try to run through some reasons to give him the benefit of the doubt, and you do have the matchup thing again. So the Dodgers, back up. The last two times that William has caught Brian Hudson were against the Dodgers when he threw 2 scoreless with a couple Ks, and then this outing on Wednesday nights where he didn't throw any sweepers, and then he only threw 1 in that outing against the Dodgers. The Dodgers one I can maybe see because, again, it's a team that doesn't chase. The primary function of Brian Hudson's sweeper is to get a chase. Yeah. When you have that much movement, it's hard to land in the zone. He does backdoor it a lot to righties when he's going well, but it's also meant to be a chase pitch more often than not. I think he could have thrown it more in that game, but didn't. You go to the Haas game then. I think part of it is Haas wanting to use that pitch more, but also the Guardians have one of the highest chase rates in baseball as a team. So that's one where it really, really makes sense to throw it a lot. So just credit to everyone there for how they use that pitch. He has not thrown it in the strike zone a lot lately, but again, I don't think that's all that relevant to me because, again, it's meant to be a chase pitch. And sometimes the best way to find a pitch is to keep throwing it.
That's what I was just going to say.
It's harder it's harder, right? It gets even harder than to get that pitch back, so to speak, if you just don't throw it. Like, obviously, I'm sure he's working on it on the side, but you still got to keep showing it in games. Like, we'll even talk about this later. Like, Freddie Peralta in his game 3 start in this series said he had no feel for the slider in this game. He still threw 6 of them.
Yep.
And he said post-game, I still needed to show it to him just so they know it's there. Like, William didn't even show it in this game. But so that was one way I was thinking of it. I was also wondering for a second, the sweeper can be hard on shoulders. And we've kind of seen some research to show this now, that it is a taxing pitch to throw because you're trying to generate so much side spin on that baseball. But if he had no problem throwing 7 of them in a single inning when Haas was behind the plate, obviously it's not that big of a concern. So that one kind of goes out the window for me. I will say that I don't think there were opportunities in this outing to throw a ton of them because he did fall behind some guys, and it's harder to throw that pitch when you're behind in the count, especially if it's primarily an outside the strike zone pitch. But there were chances to use it. Like, oddly enough, I actually think one of the worst sequences of this inning was Contreras' at bat. He ironically struck out. It was like 6 fastballs in a row, though, that whole sequence. No sweepers, nothing, just all fastballs. And then the Baker sequence, you get ahead with a cutter on strike 1, and then you double up on it, and he hammers it. Again, like, you could have gone to a sweeper there. So it's a little tough to know with Baker because he's hit breaking balls from lefties decently in the minors. It's a very small sample in the majors, but in the majors, he's done basically nothing with them. And if he is kind of one of those 4A type guys, because if I'm remembering correctly, he's not like a young guy.
No.
This is an older guy who Right, he's older 20s. He's kind of been in and out of the big leagues the last couple of years because there are some flaws in the profile. He swung and missed at a lot of lefty breaking balls and a lot of breaking balls in general when he's been in the big leagues. So I think you could have used it there. You also were facing a couple lefties that inning. You could have thrown it there. He didn't really have a chance to go to it to Newt Bar unless you wanted to first pitch it or something. But yeah, I'm I don't think I'm at the point of being upset about that inning, but to me, I just don't see a reason to not throw a single one.
Yeah.
Like and I don't think either one of us are asking him to throw it like 50% of the time. That's not realistic.
No.
Like it's never going to be the primary pitch, but why are we not seeing it at all of a sudden? And again, like it has been the last two times that William has caught him. He did use it more early in the season though when William caught him because William
Yeah.
has caught most of his appearances. So I am a little curious with what changed there because something obviously did. And I guess the jury's still out a little bit for me, just how much of it is coincidence with other game situations lining up when William was back there versus Haas being back there. But I do think that we've seen enough of both of these catchers to know that there is a difference in how they call a game. I don't think we've got enough of a sample to know how big that difference is, but there
Yeah.
is a difference that you can
Yes.
see. And this kind of leads into the first listener question that we're going to take. So Matt asked us on Twitter, what's with Wild Bill's, being William Contreras, inability to call a game, minus Frankie Montas apparently. Yes, can it get better or are we just stuck with it? I can keep going because I know you talked a lot, but off the bat, do you have any other general thoughts about Williams' game calling in responses? I know you kind of talked about it before, especially
Yeah.
with runners on.
Right. So I think what I should say is that it does the way he calls a game is it's fastball heavy. I don't think there's any denying that. Like he's fastball heavy compared to a lot of catchers, pretty much compared to any catcher. And the Brewers do have a good chunk of pitchers that's fine for. That's fine for Montas. We just talked about it. That's fine for Colin Ray. He throws three. Like the guys who throw three fastballs, it's mostly fine for those. Even Toby Myers with a cutter and a fastball. Like it's fine for those guys to be mostly and heavy fastball. I think it's more that it seems like he just takes that approach to me, almost no matter who it is out there for the Brewers. Like for the guys who are good at it, it makes perfect sense. But I just don't see it the same for guys like Hudson or Civale. I mean, those are two we've talked about before too. It almost just feels like he kind of has this routine and the way he likes to go about it, and he just does that for any of the pitchers on the Brewers staff. And I think there's almost even Devin Williams, I felt like got a little too fastball heavy in these outings since he came back. Like I feel like he's gone, and I don't think it's a good fastball. He has a very good fastball. I think it's an underrated fastball for Devin. But the Cardinals in the game that he ended up getting out of it in game one were pretty clearly trying to hit the fastball other than Williams' brother. I think he must be in his head a little bit in those positions, but like they were just going after fastballs because they're like, we're not hitting the changeup. We're not going to be able to. So throw us a fastball, and that's when we're going to swing and go after it. So I don't know. That's more what it comes down to me is that it works plenty fine for probably half of the staff, maybe even more. But I just feel like he has to adjust to the pitchers who aren't good at what he's calling with a bunch of fastballs, and I don't know if he's done that.
Yeah, I was going to echo that. I think it's hard to say that he's not a good pitch caller when you look at the results that this pitching staff has had. And I think it is a little bit circular in the sense of, yes, I do think that's the way that he leans when he's calling a game, but he's also catching a lot of guys. And most of the innings for this staff this year have come from the guys who should be throwing a lot of fastballs. Like the guys who have eaten the most innings for the Brewers. I mean, Freddie Peralta's up there. And because Freddie's only got one fastball, I think you do see William call more secondaries from him compared to some other pitchers. But like it makes sense for Colin Ray to throw a lot of fastballs as long as you're mixing all three. Bryce Wilson throws a lot of fastballs. He was in the rotation for a good chunk of the season. Tobias, he only has two, but the cutter and the four-seamer are arguably his two best pitches, and especially for him, those are pitches that he uses a lot compared to, the slider mainly being more of a put away pitch against righties, changeup being put away against lefties. Like establishing the four seamer and the cutter is very important for him because he has other ways to go once he gets ahead, but like those are his two most valuable pitches. So it makes sense to mix those a lot. So I do think it works for the most part because the guys who are eating by far the most innings for this team are guys who naturally work well with the way Contreras calls the game. And I do wonder if his approach to game calling has been shaped by that. I mean, when you get so used to working with these kinds of guys and you have success with those kinds of guys, I do think I can see how you would kind of try to translate that over to other guys who are throwing to you. But yeah, it's for me the problem comes in when he's facing guys who are not like that. And then he gets a little bit fastball heavy with those kinds of guys. Yeah. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. He has one of the highest fastball usage rate. His pitchers have one of the highest fastball usage rates when they pitch to him. Again, I do think that is a good chunk of that is a product of just who pitches the most when he's behind the plate. And I think that's why it works for the most part. So it's where I'm at with this is my eye test really wants to tell me that he's not actually that good of a game caller. But I don't like saying that outright because I just don't like putting too much stock into my eye test. Like you know me, Spencer, and anyone who's just been following my coverage for a few years now knows this. Like I don't like to say things without having something more concrete to back it up. So I don't like saying this too strongly. Like if people really want my 2 cents, in my head, I have a hard time believing he's actually that good of a game caller. And I think that the people with the Brewers, especially the pitchers who constantly praise his game calling, I think those tend to be the guys who just naturally pair well with his approach anyway. It's always Colin Ray or Tobias who are really giving him a lot of credit for his work behind the plate. Well, again, those are guys who, based on the arsenal, it's going to link up pretty well anyway. I do think there have been examples of him making some good adjustments based on what his pitcher has proven is his strength that night. Tobias credited him with one game with kind of changing things on the fly a little bit and going more fastball away against the Pirates because he was locating that pitch really well. And that's good game calling and good catching right there when you can do something like that. But by and large, there have been a lot of sequences where I disagree with how he's calling it, and a lot of them just come back to going back to a fastball when you don't need to, when that's not the best way to go. Mainly if you have a guy who's hit fastballs well, or you're in the middle of an at-bat and you just got a really bad swing on a breaking ball or an off-speed pitch where a guy was way out in front of it, and then you go right back to a fastball, which plays right into where the timing seems to be or what that guy's strength seems to be. But again, I don't like to, and that's why I'm in response to this question, I'm not going to say there's an inability to call a game there because, again, for the reasons I outlined. And also there's just so much that goes into calling pitches. Like a big part of it too is I think that just the way he fundamentally approaches it is different than the way that I fundamentally approach it or the way that you fundamentally approach it. Because there's not a one size fits all
right
for calling pitches. Like there are some guys who, I think in both of our cases, the two main things that we like to go off of the most is number one, what is the pitcher the best at? And number two, what kind of swings are you seeing within the game, within the at bat? Go off of that. I think there are some other people who are going to be like, no, we're going to go off what the scouting reports for the hitters say. And we're not going to change too quickly because we like we're confident in what that data is telling us based on the hitter going into that game. And we're going to approach it that way. Or there's so many factors that go into it and no one's going to weigh them exactly the same. But to me, I just wish he would call more breaking balls in a lot of situations where it makes sense to, and I don't think he does that. The problem is that's just incredibly hard to quantify, which is why I'm not gonna start a crusade claiming that he's a terrible pitch caller. I think it's my personal opinion based on my eye test, which again, I'm not going to put 100% conviction behind, is that he's not nearly as good at it as some people claim he is.
Yeah.
But that's just me, and a lot of it just comes down to I'd like to see more breaking balls in situations where it makes sense to throw a breaking ball. I don't think he does that enough, but it's hard to put a number on it. You can't concretely quantify this is a good situation for a breaking ball and find a way to track all of that and put it into one easy to digest stat. You can't do that. So like that's where it gets hairy because there can be a lot of confirmation bias there. So
Yep.
I'm kind of talking a lot and talking in circles, kind of doing what you were doing before. But just to wrap it up, like I don't think he calls enough breaking balls in situations where you need to call breaking balls or off speed pitches. And
Yep.
I'll leave it there. But I also fully acknowledge that there's no good way to quantify that. So I'm not gonna put my full conviction behind that statement. That's just the way that I feel based on what I see. And you can kind of take it for what it's worth.
Yeah. I'll summarize mine too. My personal belief is the same as you, that there should just be more breaking ball usage in general, and that I think he could maximize the entire staff a little bit more by doing so. Like we talked about, I think he already does a really good job with a good chunk of the staff. I'm not calling for Colin Ray or Tobias or any of those guys to throw more breaking balls. I think the pitch mix is largely pretty good for them. Once in a while, I might disagree with the call, but that's going to happen. It's more just with the players that I think they would benefit more from it, that I think he could be heavier usage for those guys. So that's it. We talked for like at least 10 minutes on that.
We still have more to talk about in this game. So kind of recap where we're at, because that was a long, long tangent. The Brewers grabbed that 4-2 lead on Churio's double or a 2-run single in the 7th. Hudson gives it back with the 2-run bottom of the 7th. Joey Ortiz then coming up in the 8th, and he was the one who hit the double that gave the Brewers another 2-run lead. This is 6-4 now. And Devin Williams comes into the game for the second day in a row after what I mentioned was a stressful outing the night before. He just did not have it in this game at all. It was precarious the first couple batters. And then by the end of that outing, by the tail end, it was just completely gone. He looked like he was running on fumes. So the sequence of this 9th inning goes leadoff hit by pitch, hitting Wilson Contreras. Jose Fermin doubles. So again, he got runners on second and third right away. He strikes out Nolan Arenado, walks Lars Nootbaar. So the bases are loaded at this point. Paul Goldschmidt's up with the bases loaded for the second night in a row. Called out on a strikeout on a pitch that was out of the strike zone. Should have been ball 4, so that should have been another walk. And then he throws 8 straight balls to Matt Carpenter and Tommy Pham to issue back-to-back bases loaded walks to tie the game. He also nearly hit Goldschmidt, didn't he, on that strikeout?
Yep. I don't know how it missed him.
As part of that sequence as well. So just all over the place. And this is where we can once again dive deep into a Pat Murphy game management choice. You weren't happy that he stayed in for that entire sequence, and I get that. And he probably should have come out before he did. Like Murphy waited until there was no chance to record a save. Yeah. And that's when he pulled his closer, like a very just abiding by the roles way of managing. I think the bigger issue is that he pitched in this game at all, because stressful outing the night before. This was Devin Williams' 5th appearance in 7 days. And this is like going back to like early season Pat Murphy, where a lot of guys were pitching under this kind of workload out of the bullpen. And that's not good for guys to have them working that often. And I think it's even worse here because, Devin has missed a lot of the year, doesn't have a ton of innings under his belt yet, had an abbreviated rehab assignment to get back here quicker, really stressful outing the night before. I know the pitch count wasn't terrible, but you also added on to the workload from previous days. Just everything about nothing here really says this guy should be available. And I really don't care what Devin tells you before the game either, because
No.
I'd be willing to guess he probably told Murphy he was fine because that's what competitors do. He wants the ball. But I think this needs to be a situation where it's, well, too bad you're not going to pitch tonight. I mean, you had Trevor McGill available, just came off the IL. He's fresh, ready to go. I know he hasn't been in a game. You'd like to ease him in a little bit more. But, like, guess what? He ended up being the one who came in with the bases loaded after Devin
Right.
blew the save. So, like, he's thrown right into the fire anyway. Like, just go to McGill here. You've got a guy who's done this for most of the season. He's back. It's just not a great night for Devin to be out there again. Like, it to me, the real mistake was pitching him at all. And you could see pretty early on that, yeah, he was not very fresh.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's the bigger mistake of the two. He never should have been out there. I couldn't believe it when they flashed to the pen and showed Devin coming in, because I was watching it with no volume, so I didn't hear anything about him warming up or anything. And when they showed Devin walking out, I was like, this seems like a bad idea right away. And it was clear, like you said, within the first two batters that it was, if he got out of it, it was going to be very stressful, and it was probably going to involve some luck because the stuff wasn't good. The command was really, really bad. He didn't have the velo on the fastball. I mean, it was clear very early on that he was not going to perform well, and you were just hoping he'd get through it. But to me, I just, he shouldn't have faced Tommy Pham. Like, I even get letting him face Matt Carpenter in that spot. I think he's more likely to get a lefty out than McGill is, and McGill could come in and give up a homer right away. Like, that wouldn't shock me if he did. Once Pham was coming to the plate and he walked Carpenter on 4 pitches that frankly weren't super competitive. Like, William was diving all over the place to catch these pitches. I do think Murph may have gotten caught up a little bit in the umpire situation rather than making that change, because McGill was ready. Like, he had been ready for Carpenter. He could have very easily done it. And I do think you're probably right. He probably was upholding the classic, like, well, he's our guy to get the save. Like, let's give him every opportunity to get the save. But that Carpenter at bat plate appearance was the absolute. I've never seen Devin look as gassed and just completely he had nothing in the tank after that, or even going into that plate appearance, clearly. But after that, it should have been super easy to make that move. And I know it's the closer, and I know he probably would have been pissed at Murph when he came out there. But to me, that's just, you got to deal with that and make that move. I would have at least liked to see Hook go out there, give him some time. Like, they didn't even make a mound visit. If you're going to keep him in, I would have loved to see him, like, get a chance to catch his breath or maybe reboot a little energy and go back out there, but they didn't really do anything. And then, yeah, the Pham plate appearance went right about how I was expecting it to after that. So I agree. The bigger issue was just using him at all, but I do think leaving him in for Pham is pretty hard to justify for any real reason other than, trying to get him the save.
If you watch the broadcast of that game, it looked like the only real interaction there was a quick just signal of asking Devin if he was good.
You good?
Well, of course he's going to say he's good. No pitcher, no competitor is going to stand on the mound in that situation and say, "Nope, I'm done. Can you come take me out?" Like, that's kind of what response are you expecting to get there when you ask that? There's only one response you're going to get, whether it's actually true or not.
Yeah.
And I mean, in that moment when you're still running on adrenaline, it probably is still true in Devin's head.
Oh, yeah.
He probably still, I'm sure he still thinks he has something left, even if he is actually physically out of gas. Like, mentally in that spot, you still want that guy. You want that batter. And that's the way it should be. That's completely normal, but that's where it becomes a responsibility of, the level heads, the game management guys, to be like, no, you don't have this guy. But it is a tricky balance, though, with that situation. Just, there are emotions and trust in the veteran guy. Like, there are things you have to manage there as well. So I can sympathize with that. My big thing is he just should not have been out there at all.
Yeah.
But blown save for Devin Williams, his first of the year. He had been really fantastic leading into that outing. Again, I think he was out there on a night when he understandably did not have his best stuff based on the workload that he's shouldered and the kind of stressful pitches he's had to throw lately. But McGill came in. He got out of the 9th inning, but then in the 10th, giving up a walk-off grand slam to Nolan Arenado to end this one. So the Brewers, with one of their more frustrating showings in a good while, times had been pretty well leading into this one. But Game 3, Milwaukee failing to score at all in this one. This was more of a quiet showing, but once again, things getting away from the Brewers late. Miles Michaelis shut down the offense. Freddie Peralta in this one, a night like last night's where you use almost all of the A bullpen to try and win, and you don't come away with one. A lot of stressful pitches thrown. You probably have multiple guys who are off limits. You need some length here. Freddie Peralta threw 92 pitches in 5 innings, reached a 3-ball count 9 times. This is a fine start, but again, I think this is one of those where it's just kind of like you're hoping for a little bit more out of your number one. Like,
Yeah.
can you give me 6 maybe? Just be a little bit more efficient than you were. And it's, like you take it, absolutely, but you hope for a guy who can eat more innings in this start than he did.
Yeah, 92 pitches in 5 innings with only 2 strikeouts and 2 walks is actually somewhat impressive. I don't know how you do that, especially 3 hits too. It's not like he was just getting singled to death or something. Like,
Well, 9
5
3-ball counts. That's how you do it.
5 base runner. No, I know, but oh my gosh, that's incredible to even do that. But yeah, you're definitely hoping for at least 6 in that type of situation with your quote unquote ace on the mound.
I will give him credit again, though, kind of like I touched on before, like with the pitch selection. He said he didn't have a feel for the slider, but he still mixed a couple in there anyway, just so it was in the back of guys' heads, as opposed to completely avoiding it, which that is a smart way to go about it. But he only threw 6 of them in this start. He had just 4 whiffs, and this is now back-to-back starts where there really has not been any swing and miss, especially against the fastball. And that's at least a little bit concerning to me, that a guy who has always gotten that much swing and miss is suddenly not getting any. And I think there's a little bit of an element of he's trying to be more efficient and pitch to more contact, but we shouldn't be seeing stuff like this where it's you're getting 3 fastball whiffs when you threw over 60 of them. Because he was very fastball heavy in this start. Over 60 of the 90 pitches were fastballs. So, yeah, you'd like to see a little bit more swing and miss from him there. Hopefully it's just a blip on the radar, but when you're seeing indicators that the fastball's losing its deceptiveness, and granted, maybe it was at least in part because he didn't throw as many breaking pitches, but just the overall package of what you saw in this start, I know we only gave up 3 hits, but on the whole, I didn't see a whole lot to be encouraged by.
Yeah, I would agree. I got nothing to add there. It's just, once again, it just feels like we should be getting more than we are from Freddie, which is unfortunate.
The most unfortunate sequence came in Nick Mears' inning. He was charged with 3 runs coming in late in the game. So the way this sequence unfolded, my takeaway is Nick Mears was not great, but he had a lot of things that could have gone more in his favor. There's a case to be made that he could have had a pretty breezy inning here. So you have a runner who reaches base, Victor Scott, with 1 out. He then gets, based on what we saw on the publicly available replay, it looked like he was tagged out. It looked like Rhys Hoskins tagged him on the fingers before the fingers touched the base. He's out. Brewers challenged the call. He was ruled safe on the field. The call stands. And what surprised me was not just the outcome. So when they say call stands, that means they didn't see enough to overturn it. That was not a very long replay review.
No.
Like, they came back with that ruling very quickly. And usually when it's call stands is, like I said, you just didn't see enough to overturn it. You got to take a pretty exhaustive look at that replay And then if you're going to get to the point where you say we didn't see anything, usually you need to have looked pretty hard to get to that point. But the fact that it was like, I don't know what the exact time was because I wasn't timing it, but I think it was under 2 minutes, the replay review. And usually when you have ones like that, it takes a little bit longer because you're looking at all these different angles, slowing it down. Like, you're trying as hard as you can to avoid a call stands, but that's what they came away with in a pretty brief review, which that was the part that surprised me just as much as the ruling, just how they got there and the fact that they didn't seem to actually take that much time to look into it.
Yeah, I really think they need to put a clock on reviews so that you can't have this type of thing happen where sometimes you look at it for 5 minutes and say it stands, and sometimes you look at it for a minute and a half and say it stands. Like, at some point, it's got to be either we are trying to make it faster, so we're going to put a clock on it and say if we can't figure it out by then it stands. I think you'd get a lot less complaining if you get to that point and you've looked at as many angles as you can and you just say, all right, it's too close. We're just going to stick with what we got. I'd be fine with that. If you said 2 minutes, that's what it is. If we can't figure it out by then, or we can't change it by then it stands. Fair enough. But when you have ones that do take a lot longer and then all of a sudden this one doesn't, and you don't say confirmed, you say stands, that is more frustrating, I think, for fans and probably for the teams playing. But also, I wish they could employ a little bit more logic when making these calls. I know it's supposed to be like a 100%. You can change you know for sure he was out on this play. I guess to me, I still think you did because you could see all 5 of his fingers on top of Rhys Hoskins' glove. Like, they weren't on the base. I'm pretty confident about that because you could see him on the glove. But I do think that's where if they're still saying, well, we don't know, maybe my guess is they're like, well, maybe his bottom of his hand was touching the base while his fingers were on the glove. Like, I'm sure that's their reasoning for it because you could see all the fingers. There's no other way you could be on the base. I think you got to be able to employ a little bit of logic there and go, yeah, but is that even possible in that scenario? Like, you can't see if it is or not, but you should be able to employ a little bit of, okay, I don't think that's possible. I think he's out. I'm 95% sure he's out. We're going to change the call. I do think that would be a better way for replay to work, but I don't think we're ever getting that in any sport, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But I do just have problems with MLB replay. I think it might be as bad as any sport, and it's weird because it feels like for the most part it's more clear cut than like a football catch where, you know, there's a bunch of different things factoring in. It's like, is he out or is he safe? You should be able to make a decision when you see the replay for the most part, but you got me on a tangent about replays. But yeah, either way, I didn't enjoy it.
So instead of the bases clear with 2 outs, there's still a man on first with 1 out. Willy Adames then forgets how to play shortstop again on a soft line drive off the bat of, it was Mason Wynn, I believe, right?
Yes.
Mason Wynn hits a soft 63-mile-an-hour liner that tips off Willy's glove. So this is a very softly hit ball, and Willy just kind of started flat-footed at shortstop. And that was essentially how that ball got past him. He started flat-footed, and I think he took like 1 step back and then jumped, and that was it. And it tipped off the lip of the glove. Spencer, I know you have thoughts about this one as well. No tangent this time, but
I won't go as deep. But I will say, as someone who played his fair share of middle infield, the first thing you do is always to run as far as you can before jumping. You don't ever just stand there and jump unless it's a line shot, obviously, where you don't have time to do it. Willy basically, he went into like a full squat before jumping, which means he had way too much time to jump if he was doing that. And I will say, he timed the jump perfectly. He got to his absolute apex as the ball went past, and that's why he tipped it. But he literally just needed to take like 2 or 3 steps back, turn and run 2 or 3 steps, and maybe even, I don't even know if he would have had to jump at that point. That's a ball that should be an out every single time, honestly. Like, that's easier than ground balls. There's no bad hop. There's like, that should be an out every time.
So now all of a sudden you have 2 guys on. instead of then at that point, runner on first and 2 outs. Now you got 2 guys on, 1 out. You then have Alec Burleson coming up. Mears throws him a 96, I think, 96-mile-an-hour fastball that was like chin level, and he got the bat to it somehow. So good pitch. I guess credit to Burleson for getting to that. And it was a fairly well-struck single, too. Like he got the head of the bat to it. So credit to him. Now you have the bases loaded. And then basically this right here is, I think, the only thing you can really blame Nick Mears for. He walks Contreras with the bases loaded after getting ahead to 2 strikes. Just didn't execute some pitches there. Then he induces a 74-mile-an-hour would-be routine flyout to straight center. Garrett Mitchell loses it in the sun. Another run scores. They do get the force out at second because runners were, kind of caught halfway because that's what you do when a ball's hit in the air. So you get that out at second, but if he catches that on the fly, the runner from third is not scoring. So that's an impactful play right there, too, or an impactful play not made that goes against Nick Mears. At that point, he comes out of the game. Bryce Wilson comes in to face Nolan Arenado. He gets ahead 0-2, hangs a curveball right down the middle, base hit that drives in the third run, which is charged to Mears as well. So I'm not going to say Nick Mears was good because, again, he gave up the 1-out single, the bases loaded walk. But those are legitimately not great plate appearances. And I don't think you can hold the pickoff against him either because Nick Mears had nothing to do with that play.
Right.
That's the defense. Like, you can say that hurt the Brewers as a whole. That doesn't really hurt Nick Mears. Like, if anything, it's actually lucky for him that if he would have gotten that base runner erased.
Mm-hmm.
But just knowing everything that happened in this inning, like, you can't fault him for the 60-mile-an-hour line drive that Adames should have caught. You can't fault him for the 75-mile-an-hour fly ball that Garrett Mitchell should have caught. Like, there's just so much that you can't fault him for Bryce Wilson hanging a 2-strike curveball. Maybe you can fault him for putting Bryce Wilson in that spot. But again, like, if those 2 batted balls shouldn't have been hits, you can't really blame him for that. So just, it was a tough inning, just a tough luck inning for everyone all around. So that would unfortunately be all the Cardinals needed in this one as they defeated the Brewers 3-0. So St. Louis picks up 1 game in the standings as a result of that series. They're still down by double digits in the standings, so it doesn't really have a huge impact on anything. Brewers already have the season series. It doesn't hurt a whole lot in terms of actual logistics, but in the moment, watching the way these games unfolded, definitely a couple of frustrating losses there. That took a while to recap all of that because we had a lot of tangents, but we will try to get into some loose ends here. We got a lot of questions this week, so I'm going to apologize in advance to the folks who we inevitably will not get to unless everyone wants a 3-hour episode. But we'll start with Nate, who asked us on Twitter, how does one fix the hole in Garrett Mitchell's swing? So we've talked a lot about this, especially a couple weeks ago when we said that despite having really strong numbers, once again, results-wise, that we were not buying in on Garrett Mitchell. And since we said that, since the day that pod went up on August 9th, he's gone 5 for his last 39 with 20 strikeouts. His season batting line has dipped below the league average. His batting average on balls in play, instead of sitting at 400, is now at 357. So it basically fell like right to the range where we were saying it has a chance to be upheld. I think he can ride a 350 BABIP because of the speed and some of the other elements of his profile. But the big thing for us has always been the hole in the swing. He just does not make contact with fastballs at the top of the zone. And there's not a lot of guys who do make a lot of contact with hard fastballs at the top of the zone, but it's especially bad for him. Like, his whiff rates were absurd at that time. He was swinging and missing at over 50% of high fastballs, and that's really bad, especially fastballs high and away. It was like 75% of his swings were swings and misses. Like, that's more than like a standard weakness than a common weakness in a guy's swing. That's just a full-on hole. So I'm going to preface this by saying that, like, swing mechanics and hitting analysis, I think that pitching has always been more of my I don't have a good term for this, just my strong suit, I guess, in terms
Yeah.
of analysis and kind of breaking down the nitty-gritty a little bit more. But I'll say about Garrett Mitchell, I think the two things that he really needs are, number one, I think he's got to find just a better hand position, something that works for him. And I was looking at a little bit of video before we started recording this. It looked like he dropped his hands a little bit by the time they got to St. Louis compared to where he was starting, especially in that Dodgers series. It was just a couple videos I was looking at, so maybe it was just something that was specific to a couple of at bats, but it looked like his hands went down a little bit. So he's got to just find a comfortable starting position there. But I also think the swing path in general just needs to be flatter. And that's something that you do see guys teaching now in the game, just a really flat swing path. Jake Bauers probably is not the greatest example to use right now, given that he's been striking out just as much, if not more, than Mitchell lately. But that's something that he worked on when he was with the Yankees last year that helped him find more power. He just adopted a flatter bat path. It's flatter through the zone, can help you be a little bit more direct to the ball. I think that's something that Garrett needs, and I think that would help him out a lot. I've always said that this is what it's going to take for him to be a player who I buy into offensively, to be a player who can tap into the raw tools that he has. He needs a swing change, and I think that those are some specific things that could help him out a little bit more. Spencer, do you have anything to add to that?
A little. I find it interesting that he lowered the hands a little bit because I think my adjustment probably would have been raising them a bit from where he is. And I actually
Right.
think his hands were in a better place his first 2 years. He lowered them this year coming into the year. And I think that just kind of exacerbated the problem with the high fastballs. Like, I think that made it worse. But I agree with you. I think it seems like a relatively flat swing already. Like, it's not one of those, like, it's not Keston's level of, the
No,
bat
no,
angle
not
just
even
being
close.
like straight down. But it feels like the path just immediately goes down, even though the bat seems like the plane is on a decent level. It seems like it just goes right to the bottom of the zone or middle of the zone right away. And it feels like he could have a little bit more adjustability you don't want to say, I almost wonder if him trying to get rid of grounders or to hit less grounders ended up getting him into this spot a little bit more. Because I think he was chopping early in his career, and that at least allows you to get to a high pitch because your bat's in that area at one point. It just feels like he can't even hardly get up there now because of where he goes. But I do think starting the slot higher, the hands higher to begin with, would help with that too. Like, if the bat path comes out of that slot, it means you can get to the higher pitch by starting a little bit higher. I am also not a huge swing mechanics guy. I did consult with Gunnar Amelunk a little bit. He's pretty good with swings. I will give him a lot of credit on that. He's pretty good with that stuff. And he did say that he thinks the biggest thing would be raising the hands. I will also note Gunnar, big Garrett Mitchell believer. So don't take him at his word. He's a little too confident in him for me, but yeah, that's where I would be.
Another question we got relating to an potential outside acquisition. How would you feel about a Christian Walker signing this offseason to replace Adamas's bat? If Rhys Hoskins exercises his player option, I don't see it. I don't think that you
Right.
can carry two right-handed first basemen on the roster at the same time. You could put Walker in the field and DH Rhys, I guess, but because Walker is one of the best defensive
He's
first
very good.
basemen in
Yeah.
baseball. But just from a roster construction standpoint, I have a really hard time seeing a way that you can roster two right-handed power hitting first basemen who are not going to be able to play anywhere else on the field. I have a hard time finding a way to make that work. I think that what the Brewers have right now, where you can have multiple first basemen on the roster, but it's got to be a lefty righty situation like what they've done this year. So I think you have to look into a couple of other ways to replace Adamas's bat. Similar question. C. Paul Martin asked us on Twitter, what does the infield look like next year? Ortiz at short. Who's playing third? He also asked if Rhys is going to be here next year, and based on that, could Yelich play some first base? So Ortiz will be at short. I'm assuming that seems like almost a given at this
Yes.
point, barring something unforeseen. As far as internal options for third base, I don't see a lot. I don't I don't want to give up on Tyler Black at third base yet. Like, I'm not quite sure where the Brewers are at with him at that position, but if they think he can still give it a go, he could be an option. Otherwise, you're looking pretty sparse for that spot unless you're
Yeah.
relying on a pretty quick arrival for someone like Brock Wilken. And I don't know if you can go into the year expecting that. I think you need to have a little bit more stability over there. I think they probably will have to go external if they want to fill that role. You can kind of think of it as, instead of re-signing Adames, you're trying to bring in a third baseman for a little bit more of the short term to just kind of round out that infield. As far as Hoskins, like I said before, he's opting in. I fully expect him to opt in. He's sitting
Agreed.
at a league average offensive line right now, a league average batting line as a terrible defensive first baseman. So he's basically been replacement level this year. He's not going to hit the market and turn down $18 million in favor of looking for a new deal when he's having a replacement level season. I'm sure he's going to opt in. He'll be here next year. So that kind of erases the question of Yelich playing first base a little bit. I also think just with first base too, like I know we talk a lot about moving guys to first base as a lighter defensive position. It's not easy for guys who have had back problems.
No.
And that was part of the reason why we never saw Ryan Braun play a ton of first base, even when the Brewers tried that. It wasn't great for his back. He also just was in a spot where other options kind of established themselves at that position, but it wasn't great for his back. It would not be good for the issues that Yelich has had with his back. I know he's had the surgery, but you probably don't want to put him right on the infield dirt after he's coming back from that. So you'll have Reese there anyway. If Black is sticking at first, he's still an option there from the left side. So I I don't think we're going to see Christian Yelich at first base. If anything, closer to full-time DH maybe,
Yeah.
but I don't expect him to play there. Spencer, do you have anything to add on the potential shape of the infield for next season?
Not really. I think Mike Bovee might be the one who actually could end up taking that spot, even more than Wilkin if they went into spring. He has hit pretty well, even at the AA level, better than Wilkin. I think they both play third similarly. I think his arm's probably a little bit worse, but I would say I would trust Mike Bovee as much or more than like Monasterio at third base defensively. And if he hits in spring, you know who we didn't? Oliver Dunn. I could see Oliver Dunn having a good spring next year and
I
popping
could, yeah.
in.
Mhm.
I'll toss Oliver Dunn into that mix, but that's it.
Yeah, I still like, just Ollie Dunn's makeup as a ball player and as an athlete. Like, I think
Same.
he's a very underrated athlete, and he's got the speed and he's got the raw power, and he's a lot better defensively than I was
Yeah.
anticipating going in. Like, I believe he can be a good defender at third base. We saw flashes of it when he was in the big leagues early on this year. I think it's just a question of, has he developed enough to the point where he's ready?
Right.
And I think if he had had the luxury of remaining healthy and spending most of this year playing in Nashville, getting those AAA at bats under his belt, I would feel a lot better. But now it's TBD if he's going to play again this year
Yeah.
in the minor leagues. So at that point, you're kind of looking at a lost season then, added into all of the other things that we know about where he's at as a player, where his career trajectory has taken him. Gets a little bit tougher then. But yeah, you can definitely keep him in the mix. I'm sure he's going to hang on to a 40-man spot this offseason, I think, just because of the
Hmm.
potential upside there. But yeah, you can throw him into the mix as well. We got another question via email this week from Bill. He asked us about the catching situation and kind of how the Brewers are using William Contreras. He says, with Yelich out and Jake Bauers playing so infrequently, Hoskins can play first, Contreras can DH without leaving any quote unquote must play bats on the bench. So he asks, why aren't the Brewers taking advantage of this opportunity to get more time for Sanchez or Haas? He says that there could be a potential benefit just defensively, keeping William fresher, maybe getting some better pitch calling from some of these guys. Eric Haas, especially, is a guy who I like behind the plate as a game caller. But he's just kind of asking, why isn't this something they've done more? Well, part of it was that Black was up here for a few days and they wanted to get him the DH at bats. But he's been sent down now. Blake Perkins was activated on Thursday. And if you actually look at what the Brewers have done the last 5 games, William Contreras has DH'd in 3 of them, and they've gotten some starts for Eric Haas. They've gotten some starts for Gary Sanchez. So I do think it is something that we could see a little bit more of based on the way the roster is constructed now. I think that the way you saw this unfolding is once Yelich got hurt, Jake Bauers was kind of the first guy to get the opportunity to step in as a left-handed bat. He played some first base while Hoskins DH'd, or he DH'd while Hoskins played first. Bauers pretty quickly went into a slump when he got that opportunity, so I think that opportunity's passed him by for the most part based on how things have gone for him over the last couple weeks. Then that kind of coincided with Perkins hitting the IL, Black coming up, so now we want Black to get the at-bats. But now Black is back down. Bauers is probably not going to get as many opportunities as the Brewers are probably hoping they could give him. Now I think you're in a spot where you could see this more.
Agreed.
We'll take one more question for this section. Again, there'll be a couple that we left out. Sorry about that. We just want to keep things moving here. Neil asked us a couple of different questions. One of his questions relates to Tyler Black. He says, are we ruining Tyler Black? I feel like he's getting the Hira experience. Spencer, I know you kind of picked this one out as a potential fun one to answer. Do you want to take this one first?
Absolutely. I don't get how we're still here and saying the Brewers ruined Keston Hira, but we've made it this far and we've still got that in our heads. I mean, you're not alone, Neil. I'm not picking on you by any means. There are a lot of people who still are very, very big Keston Hira believers. I think I've made it pretty clear, and Jack has as well. We're not among those believers in Keston, but I've always found it weird that it was seen as the Brewers were like treating Keston wrong. I don't ever feel like they did. In fact, I thought he got quite a few opportunities. They tried different positions. They tried a lot of different things with him. I actually do think Black has kind of had that sort of experience, but I wouldn't say it's like the same situation because Black has he's tough to find room in the lineup for, like, because of what we all just talked about. We have 3 catchers who you do want to get most of them into the lineup. You have Reese, who probably should be DHing more than he is, but because of the other situations, we're already using a lot of people at DH. So he plays a lot of first, and you have Bauers who can play first, and then you probably do have Reese DHing. So Black hasn't found a position. We're not ruining Tyler Black by having him come up and down. In fact, when he's come up, he's gotten opportunities. They haven't just sat him on the bench when he's here. I think that would be a better argument for it if he came up and he never played when he was up. I think that would probably be more of a hit to the confidence. I think that would probably be like, am I really just like 26th man depth to the team right now? I don't think he's been treated that way. I think he's been treated as a guy who, yeah, we want you to play when you come up, but when the whole team is healthy and available, it's just hard for us to get you consistent playing time. So we send you back to AAA so that you can get those consistent at-bats. I don't feel like he's been treated poorly. My guess would be they made it pretty clear with Black that this would be how it worked this year. And I'm sure they're communicating with him. I'm sure he's not left in the dark on this. Like, why am I going up and down? So I would push back on like the Brewers treating him poorly or anything like that. And I would do the same with Keston, but we've gone through that plenty of times. So I'll toss it back to Jack.
Actually, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think I'm just going to transition now to your minor league sandbox because we can keep talking about guys who could potentially impact the Brewers or maybe have been up already. We'll see. But Spencer, the minor league sandbox is returning this week because we did not have it last week. In your absence, I'm sorry. The minor league segment consisted solely of Kurt just yelling Jesus Made.
I heard it.
Left it there. But you now have your opportunity to get us up to speed on everything that's been going on in the minor leagues, but try to keep it at least somewhat brief because the runtime is getting a little bit out of hand here.
I promise. I'll do my best. All right. Rapid fire here. Starting, of course, with our Craig Yoho update. He has thrown 4 1/3 innings at AAA. He struck out 7, 0 walks, 0 runs. His Statcast thinks his changeup is a lefty curveball. Baseball America wrote about it being maybe the most outlier of a changeup they've ever seen. They said he's actually generating top spin, which is why it's reading it as a curveball. And his numbers through some of the more advanced stats, like he's got a 192 expected weighted on base average, 84 as the average exit velo. He's only got a 22% hard hit rate, 44% strikeout rate, 0% walk, 39% whiff rate. Neil Matson asks, when do we see Yoho in the majors? I've talked about this a lot. We've talked about it a lot, but it should be soon. I think he's one of the best 7 or 8 relievers, and you want your best bullpen in the playoffs, but I have no actual clue when it'll happen. He did miss about a week. His wife and him had a baby, so that was why he went on the inactive list for a little bit, but congrats to him for that, and hopefully we do see him in the major soon. The other guy that could be on that same type of path is Jacob Mizrowski. As a true reliever in AAA, meaning not starting the game and pitching reliever innings, but he's had 3 appearances where he actually came out of the bullpen. He's gone 5 2/3. He has not allowed a hit or a walk. He has not given up a run. He's struck out 7, and he's thrown 73% of his pitches for strikes, which is a big deal for him. He's got a 205 expected weighted on base. 80 is the average exit velo, only a 12% hard hit rate, a 31% strikeout rate, 9% walk rate, and a 29% whiff rate. Looking at some of the fastball data, it's pretty similar to Devin Williams, except he throws it like 3 or 4 miles per hour harder. So it's going to be a really good pitch. We'll quickly touch on a couple others. Nick Merkel, who is in AA. He was an undrafted free agent in 2022 out of an NAIA school in Missouri. In August so far, he's gone 13 2/3, 18 strikeouts to 5 walks, 0.66 ERA. His whiff rate is 38.2%, and he has a ground ball rate of 65.5%. So anytime you get whiffs and grounders that often, very good thing. Tate Keener, since being promoted to AA, he's made 3 starts. He's gone 16 innings, 18 Ks, 5 walks. He has given up 2 homers, and his whiff rate, which was 36% in high A, is now 27% in those first 3 starts. So something to monitor, but pretty good surface level stats. He's got an ERA under 3 in those 3 starts as well. One DSL pitcher, I tweeted about him, Wande Torres. He's a 6'3" lefty. He's 19 years old. He's around 95 to 97 from the left side with a pretty good looking slider, or it looks kind of slurvy. In the DSL, he went 15 2/3 total. He had a 53.2% strikeout rate and a 9.7% walk rate, 1.72 ERA to a 1.49 FIP. It sounds like he's in Arizona now, working in the Bridge League. So there might be a chance we see him in Carolina if he shows that he can perform stateside as well. And Carolina could be in need of some arms down the stretch. On the offensive side, a name a lot of people probably remember and may have forgotten about, Hedbert Perez. He returned from a torn ACL. That's how he ended last season. He played his first few games at high A now. I was actually in attendance for his first game, but it's only 25 plate appearances, but he does have a 124 WRC+. The swing still looks fantastic. He has a triple and a homer. He made a really good play for Enoli Paredes while he was on his rehab assignment there in left field. I just want to point out, don't forget about him. He's 21 years old. He's like the age of a college draft pick, and honestly, a younger college draft pick, playing at high A, showing power, showing all the abilities that made him a really big name a couple years ago. He still has time. Just something to keep an eye on. Another prospect that a lot of people this is more league-wide, Connor Scott. He was the 13th pick in the 2018 draft by Miami. He was traded a couple of years ago to Pittsburgh for Jacob Stallings. He got cut by Pittsburgh this year, signed by the Brewers a couple of months ago. With Pittsburgh in AA this year, he had a 13 WRC+ and a 392 OPS, no homers in 87 plate appearances. Since signing with the Brewers, he has a 140 WRC+, 823 OPS with 4 homers and 111 plate appearances. His strikeout rate is down from 29 to 21. He has prospect pedigree. He got Kyle Tucker comps out of high school. He's not that, but he's got some speed. He's got a cannon of an arm. He was seen as a 2-way in high school. Some people thought he might get drafted as a pitcher. He's a minor league free agent this offseason. I'm hoping they can bring him back and try and develop him because he's only 24 years old. He seems like somebody who might still have something left in the tank. On the DSL side, got to talk about those guys. Their season did just end. Jesus Mate, He was ranked number 54 by Kylie McDaniel of ESPN. There's a great write-up there. One rival executive said he could be a superstar about Made. He had fantastic numbers. I've talked about him enough. Juan Ortuño, he had an under-the-radar season compared to like Made and Luis Pena and all those guys. He had 2 of his 3 homers in August. 17 years old. He only turned 17 in April. He had a 159 WRC plus. He walked more than he struck out. He showed that power. He had 22 steals. He had a very, very good season. He's another one to watch. A couple other names to watch. Frandy LaFond. He got a late start to the season due to injury. Ended up posting a 131 WRC plus. He had 3 homers. Brewers PD put out some video of him a couple days ago now. Going into the season, I was told he was one to keep an eye on. And based on the little video that we do have, the swing looks really nice. He walked about 13% of the time. He struck out close to 22, which is a little high for the DSL. Will definitely be something to watch, but there's pop and athleticism there. He did steal a decent amount of bases as well. And then the highest bonus in the signing class didn't go to any of these names, but it went to Jorge Quintana, a shortstop. He's been overshadowed by a lot of the other guys, but he finished really strong. His last month of games, he had a 141 WRC plus, got it up to 106 on the season after a really, really rough start. In that month stretch, his walk rate was 17%. His strikeout rate was 18. He had 8 extra base hits, 6 doubles, a triple, and a homer of his 21 hits. Just reminded people that he did get the biggest bonus of anybody and that there's a lot of talent there. But in a lot of seasons, you would have felt pretty decent about his year. It's just comparatively to everyone else, it wasn't as exciting. Couple injuries on the minor league side. Mike Bovee, who I mentioned, did end up going on the 60-day IL for Biloxi, which means he will not be playing again this year because he just got placed on the 7-day a few days earlier. Sam Gardner, another pitcher that I find pretty interesting as a potential reliever, he also got moved to the 60-day for Biloxi. And then Josh Adamshevsky was placed on low A, Carolina's 7-day IL. I'm not 100% sure what's wrong with him there. I'm not sure how long he'll be out, but he was one that was looking pretty exciting early on for low A. But that'll wrap it up on the minor league side, and I will toss it back to Jack for our injury report.
You went so quick that I wasn't even prepared to jump back in, so good job. But this might be the shortest the injury update section has been all season, so that's probably a good thing, all things considered. And Oli Paredes was promoted or reassigned to AAA Nashville to continue his rehab assignment. Hopefully we'll see him back as an option in the near future. Another reliever who was in Nashville rehabbing, Rob Zastryzny. He made his last rehab appearance 10 days ago on August 13th. He felt some tightness in that outing. According to Pat Murphy, he has not pitched since, but they're hopeful that they'll be able to get him back in game action sooner than later. And then JB Bukauskas is still rehabbing the oblique injury that cropped up when he attempted to restart his rehab assignments. Murphy said that right now he's on track to be back by the end of September, which that's a pretty tight timeline for being able to pitch for the Brewers again this year, because end of September is the end of the regular season. So we'll see if we see him again, but just kind of unfortunate the way that the season is unfolded for him, because I do still firmly believe that he was a guy who would have ended up becoming a leverage pitcher if he was healthy. I really like that sinker, really like the slider. So hopefully he's able to get back to full health, and there's a chance he is granted another 4th option year. Or because they didn't use his option this year, I suppose,
Right.
because he was on the IL the whole time. So he'll probably carry that into next year anyway, but he'll probably have it intact basically because of the way things have unfolded, is the point that I'm trying to make here. So we could still see him as a factor for next year. But that's all that we have for injury updates this week. We will wrap it up by previewing the Brewers' final series at the Coliseum. They're going to go to Oakland this weekend, and to me, this has some pretty major trap series potential. You're going up against a team that not a lot of people have paid attention to or really put a lot of stock in. And I know the record isn't very good, but The A's have gotten quite a bit better this year than they were last year. They have some talent on this roster. There are guys who you cannot overlook. And you're coming in here. I know you just had a couple rough losses against the Cardinals, but by and large, things have been going pretty well for you as of late. You're really comfortable with your standings in the division. You're going up against a team that you think should be pretty beatable. This has trap series written all over it. So you need to go into this one still maintaining the competitive edge here. But the pitching matchups that we have lined up for this one, Friday night, Aaron Civale and his new slider are going to be back on the bump. Left-hander JP Sears is going to take the ball for Oakland. That's an 8:40 p.m. first pitch. Remember, the Brewers will be out west, so it's going to be some later start times. Saturday, it's going to be Colin Ray and Joe Boyle. That's a 3:07 first pitch. So is Sunday, which will be Frankie Montas and Joey Estes in the series finale. So we'll be back with everyone at the same time next week to recap all of the action as well as all of the action from the rest of the week coming up. Until then, thank you as always for tuning in. You can follow each of us on our respective Twitter pages. I'm at by Jack Stearns. Spencer is at SMchaos234. You can follow the pod at BF_pod. That's where we take questions every week for the show. And hopefully we get some more fantastic questions like we did this week. Again, sorry if we couldn't get to everybody, but we wanted to keep this episode to under 2 hours, hopefully just over an hour and a half, I think is where we're going to end up with on this one. But as always, thank you all for listening. We will talk to you next week. Go Brewers.